Meditation is not what you think. You don't have to stop your mind from thinking, sit in any weird postures, or make any bizarre sounds. All you need is a little guidance, and after that, the practice will show you the way. I'm Dena Argyropoulou, a meditation instructor and creator of the One Fierce Heart podcast. And in each episode, I talk with experienced teachers and practitioners to demystify meditation, giving you practical tips on how to start, ways to face the challenges, while also acknowledging the transformative power and clarity that come with meditation. So please join us as we dive deeper into this mysterious yet ridiculously simple practice that's been around for over 2,500 years. If you want to learn how to meditate, you can join my free weekly newsletter at theonefierceheart.com, where I share audio-guided meditations and occasionally programs and ways to work with me. So, take a deep breath, let it go, and let's begin. Today, I talk with Miles, an Aikido teacher with 22,000 hours of meditation practice behind him, who uses his practice as a tool for spiritual growth, and how nothing of what he's discovered through meditation is like what he imagined it was going to be. That's the fascinating part of meditation. The aftermath of the practice is unknown and discovered only when you actually do it. He also introduces me to the concept of a mindful sandwich, and I love everything about it. And no, it's not edible, but you'll get to hear how simple it is and how much it helps. So here's Miles. Miles, thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to ask you how you're doing. How has 2020 and everything that is happening in the world impacted you?
2020 and everything that's happening right now. Wow, 2020 has been a dark night of the soul, globally. What an interesting year we have been through. It was, it's like, I'm not being flippant by using the term dark night of the soul. It really felt like we went through this collectively and even individually in probably many cases. And I would say early on, there was like trying to get control of the situation and make an opportunity out of the crisis. And then within a few weeks, realizing, oh shit, there's actually, here's how I'll compare it. It's a perfect way to compare it, and it's something that we it's a model that a friend of mine uses in Aikido. His name is Patrick Cassidy, and if you think of somebody attacking you, it could just be a little argument or an actual attack, but the first experience is oh shit, and then as we settle and ground and cope, we move from oh shit to okay, and then as we cope with the okay part of it, and we start to kind of get our feet underneath us, we move into oh wow, there's a lot of generative energy here in this crisis. And as we kind of move from that and we cope with that, or I shouldn't say, but evolve more into the oh wow part, we move into oh thank you. And yeah, that's what 2020 has been like with me. It's been quite a year. I would say a lot of resilience has been built up through the past year. And I just happened to be in Israel, which, happens to be the first country to get everybody vaccinated. And we are, I guess, around 70% of the population is vaccinated. And because of that, whether your listeners agree with that or don't agree with that, that's not really my point. But because of that, socially, we are opening back up. So I was able to open my dojo 2 months ago, where we're doing our full training. At the beginning of this week, we were able to kind of go without masks in public. It was no longer mandated. And we're getting back to normal somehow.
Wow. That sounds incredible and really far from where we are at here in Athens, Greece. Yeah, in many places. So tell me about Aikido. I know nothing about it. And I would love to hear all about it and how you're incorporating that in your work.
Yeah. Okay. So this is my the way I work with Aikido is always with the evolutionary in an evolutionary / spiritual context. Evolutionary being that it's the conflict itself that creates the evolutionary tension for us to grow as human beings individually and more importantly collectively. So in that sense, it's a beautiful conflict resolution modality. But as a martial art, it is the only 100% life affirming martial art. So all other martial arts are zero sum, that there's always a loser. So our sense of satisfaction, you think of a fight or a conflict or an argument you have with somebody, if you're smart enough and clever enough to kind of, I don't know, do verbal jujitsu on them, you win the argument, you'll be satisfied, but it's at the expense of another person's dissatisfaction. And if you make that kind of postmodern move to where, okay, we're going to agree to disagree, that's also okay. But, you go to your corner with your part, and I go to my corner with my part, and we're probably happy that we didn't fight, but we're not 100% satisfied because we didn't really get on the same page. So in that sense, it's still zero sum. You take 50% to your side, I take 50% to my side, and it's still a kind of zero sum. A positive sum result is when you 100% feel validated and affirmed in your view, perspective, worldview, and I feel 100% affirmed in my worldview and perspective, and we're able to come together in a greater worldview that's inclusive of both. That's a positive sum result. And Aikido, philosophically, technically, and certainly in our intention, is oriented towards that. However, as human beings, we're not always doing that, but at least the art is.
I was going to say, how challenging well,
it's incredibly challenging. I'll tell you why, Dena. It's incredibly challenging because when two people, you and I, or two groups, it doesn't really matter, but if we were to enter a little bit of a conflict, basically what it means is that our boundaries, our identities, our beliefs, our desires and fears, or whatever, it doesn't matter, they're kind of rubbing up against each other in a way that becomes uncomfortable. That's the definition. That friction is the definition of conflict. And everything inside of us, we are biologically hardwired to fight, flight, and freeze in those situations. Our ancestors are the ones who survived the saber-toothed tigers that were hiding in the bushes. They're not the ones that were, sitting down and meditating and sunning on the rocks and pretending that that danger didn't exist. Those people, those cavemen and cavewomen got eaten and selected out of the human project. It was the paranoid cavemen and cavewomen that survived, and their genetic code got passed on, and that's our genetic code. So everything in us, in a moment of conflict, wants to contract and fight, flight, freeze. Whether it's physically or emotionally, verbally, whatever, globally, socially, economically, politically, nationalistically, whatever, even beliefs and ideologies, etc. That's kind of how it plays out. And Aikido requires us to stop, center, ground, breathe, come back to ourself, and then, and here's the super hard part, Dena, connect with the source of conflict. That's hard to do. It takes practice. On a good day with the right people under the right circumstances, hanging out in a podcast with Dena on a Tuesday, midday Tuesday in a sunny day, a spring day at the edge of the Mediterranean with a coffee. That's all kind of nice and easy. The conditions are nice, and I like you, so it's easy to do that. But if we hung out long enough, it would just be a matter of time before some disagreement were to come up. So in those moments when everything inside of us is screaming, danger, danger, counterintuitively, we need to stop, breathe, and connect. That's the fundamental required preparation for Aikido to ever happen. And then when I can do that, and through the grace of just the grace of God or some type of happy luck, you're also able to do that, and we're able to do that together. It doesn't mean the conflict goes away. Like I said, we're not denying the conflict, but when we're able to do that together, when your energy and my energy are pressing up together, and the boundary, the interface of that friction It has an energy, and that energy is an intelligence, and that energy has a direction. If somehow we're able to allow that direction to play out, it will move towards wholeness. And that wholeness, that energetic movement itself is Aikido. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, great. Yeah. so easy to map out, and yet so hard to do.
You made it easy. You explained it in terms that made it easy for me to understand. How is that? So how are you incorporating that in your work? So you're in Israel, and how has that come to be?
And I'm originally from Texas, 25, 26 years old. I moved to Japan. I lived there for 8 years practicing Aikido full-time, Countryside Dojo, famous dojo. At the end of that, I feel like I had kind of reached my physical peak. I climbed, achieved what I wanted to achieve going there. And yet I was feeling it was lacking, that just the physical training was no longer satisfying, that I was looking for something more, that I was always looking for something more, and that was some type of spiritual, realization. And so instead of going back to America and starting to teach Aikido, I decided to go on to Burma and practice meditation with a man named Sayadaw U Pandita, who is he's a pretty famous teacher in the Vipassana circles. He's also the teacher of other Western teachers like Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg and Jack Kornfield and John Kabat-Zinn. He had a big impact on a lot of people, and because of that, I went to look for him, and I practiced Vipassana meditation in his lineage with him, and then with one of his successors. I shouldn't say successor, one of his appointed teachers, his certified teachers, a man named Sayadaw U Vivekananda. He had the Pandita Meditation Center in Lumbini, Nepal. So I was with U Pandita for 2 years in Burma, and then 1 year, additional year with Vivekananda in Nepal. And
so you stayed there for 3 years. And so the 3 years you were studying meditation, Vipassana meditation.
Yeah,
there?
It's a little bit different. I over an 8-year period, I was spending every winter on retreat. And at the beginning, so it's a total of 3 years, but at the beginning it was a total of 2 years in Burma, and then I went on to do the same training, but a different type of training with Sayadaw Vivekananda, but all under the same story of U Pandita. Now, I had always planned on returning back to the States. But over that 8-year period, as a way to support myself, I was teaching Aikido on the off-season, mostly around Europe, doing a traveling seminar circuit, and Israel was included in that circuit. And I used Tel Aviv as my home base for a few years. And I actually like it. It's a nice Mediterranean city. And I enjoyed it. And at the end of my travels, it was very clear for me, Dena, that I'd spent 16 years kind of out of society in Japan, and or maybe I should say on the fringes of society, but certainly out of my culture. And it was very clear that my continued development, I developed myself physically with Aikido, and then mentally, the mind with all the meditation. And it was just clear that, on my journey up the proverbial metaphorical mountaintop, I left a lot of things back in the cities, back in the marketplace that I didn't yet deal with. So it's very clear for me that it was time to come back to the marketplace and integrate and do therapy and relationships and start to deal with money in ways that I didn't have to deal with in 16 years and all of these crazy things. And Israel, since I was using it as a base here, I just decided, and I am Jewish, so I could easily move here. It was not immigration was not a problem. So I decided to live here, and I still question that decision. I have a love-hate relationship with Israel, but basically the lifestyle is good, and I was happy to be here during this COVID period because it was actually a good place to be. And but I did do work with Palestinians. I opened up. I started a nonprofit organization called Aikido Without Borders, and for 8 years I was teaching Aikido in the West Bank as well as here in Israel. And that project is kind of coming to a conclusion already a few years ago. But all of this is the arc of my own personal development journey and how it started for just my own personal, in a way, light enlightenment project, but then also coming back and giving back to the world, and that's what I continue to do today. mostly through teaching online, but I also have a school here in Tel Aviv, and I do have some contact with my students in the West Bank as well.
Wow. And it starts always like that though, doesn't it? Well, I shouldn't say always, but it usually starts like the personal thing, the personal exploration, and then it expands. I don't know, like, if it ever starts. I mean, because I just don't know. It hasn't been that experience for me where it's like it first expands and it's like for everyone and let me give and I love everyone. Maybe in theory it starts that way, or some people start that way, but then it always, for me, has been starting with myself first and then working with that and then expanding and then expanding and then expanding.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? It's amazing because, in a way, like our biggest lessons to learn in life, be it demons or just confusion or, overcoming past traumas or whatever it may be, our biggest lessons in life also, once we fully process those lessons, they become our biggest gifts for others.
Mm-hmm. And embody them.
And I think that's, yeah, and that's part of our human, I think that's part of the cycle of humanity that we go through and we learn often the hard way, but we learn how things work in a more functional, generative, and naturally realistic way. And then we're able to turn around and help other people see that. To alleviate suffering of all humanity.
So what was your first experience with meditation? Can you describe that period? Like, what was the first time why did you start meditation, and what was that first connection with it?
Good question. Formal meditation, it came much later in my life, but when I was 3 years old, I had a kind of a special experience, although it was just it was a non-ordinary experience that's actually kind of also ordinary, as I understand it now. But I was sitting on the front porch of my house in the suburb of Dallas, Texas, in the summertime, and I had a shift in perception that I understand now was some type of direct experience of non-conceptual reality, and at the time, as a 3-year-old boy, I had nothing in my mind no reference in my mind to hold it. And I didn't even understand it. I didn't even analyze it. I just had that experience. Everything was as it is, with no mental mediation or identification or interpretation. It was just a pure, open, pristine, direct, pure witnessing of reality that lasted for maybe 5 minutes. And like I said, I was 3 years old, and why do I still remember that? Because it stuck with me my whole life. And then I went on with my life, and growing up as a child and as a teenager, whatever. But I never forgot that experience. And I think the reason I never forgot that experience because I realized that in and of that part of the nature of that experience was that there was no problem, so that I was free. There was liberation within that experience, and I believe I was chasing or trying to regain that experience in many of the activities I was doing throughout my whole life. As a young man, I did a lot of sports, and I found in sports, I often, almost all the time, in fact, would get into a flow state where where the magic happens. You're just doing sports and playing, maybe even just playing, whatever, with your friends, and just the most magical, amazing things would happen that were completely nothing that I could try to do if my mind said, "Hey, I'm going to try to do this thing," and it just wouldn't happen. But then these amazing experiences of flow would open up, and therefore I chased after a lot of different sports, and I played a lot of different sports, and I gained a lot of good things there. But I realized that actually what I was looking for was this spiritual, transpersonal flow experience. And that's what I had in Aikido, and that's what I was always searching for. And then I also realized that meditation was the way to gain that. And I would often, as a child, be in bed. It's so funny, you look back at the experience we had as kids, and I start to understand them now in deeper meditative experiences. I remember sometimes in bed, I probably ate too much sugar, so I couldn't fall asleep, but it was the middle of the night and dark, and And I would start to have images of rapidly flashing pictures of bodies in decay. Like the skin was rotting and stuff like that. Now, it wasn't a big experience, and it didn't freak me out psychologically. It was just like, wow, that's weird. What is that? And I only realized many years later as I practiced, as I did my formal meditation practice, and I would go into states of, shift into states of dissolution, and especially the more dark night of the soul stages of dissolution, that's exactly what I was seeing. I was experiencing it. Again, that was not an experience that freaked me out when I was a kid. I didn't feel like I had to go to see a doctor or take medicine, which I could imagine maybe for some people that would be pretty freaky. It happened a few times. It certainly happened enough for me to never forget it, but it was just a passing experience. But then I realized now that these were deep meditative experiences, and they were simply the mind projecting images of dissolution, of things in dissolve and decay, which is actually the true nature of reality. That's what we learn, certainly from the Buddhist perspective. The very first truth, the noble truth, the high-level truth, is dukkha secca, that suffering exists. And that basically means, why suffering exists? Because everything is changing all the time. That everything has a phase of coming into manifestation. It has a phase of fruition of that manifestation. And it has a phase of decay. We all get old, we all get sick, and we all die, period. And I just think I was seeing that truth at a very early age.
That's a powerful realization, and especially to have it at such a young age. And it's certainly what I'm contemplating and being challenged with, at this period in my life. And especially that realization that we're going to die, because we all know that we're going to die, but we don't really know that we're going to die. And once that realization hit me,
Totally.
Yeah. And once that hit me, I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, I'm going to die. And aging, and just even seeing the form, life just for my body and my skin and like everything and all these things changing and shifting, and having to deal with letting go of that and working with that, and it's just such a process.
It's such a process, yeah.
Now, I'm wondering if you chasing that flow, like that you said you were trying to chase that, like being in that flow, was that like an obstacle, you think? And is that an obstacle, us chasing?
The chasing, sure.
We're always trying, like through meditation too, like, oh, I want to meditate, because I want to get this. And we're always like chasing something.
Of course. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we just said a lot of stuff, so that's great. But that's great. I think what it was when I say chasing, the other parts of my life were not satisfying. Whatever. I had to mow the lawn. I had to clean the house. I had to, whatever. Probably I had great relationship with my sisters, but maybe I was arguing with my sisters about something, and my parents were separated, and my father was living in Canada, so I didn't see him that much at an early age. There was a lot of stuff that was going on that were not satisfying in my life, and I was never really an academic person, so studies in school didn't really, occasionally a teacher really turned me on, but usually that was like I just wanted to hang out and play with my friends. And those moments of sports and play, physical play at my leading edge were the deepest, most satisfying experiences of my life. So naturally, yes, I did chase those and try to get back into those. And I would also, under the right conditions, would be able to access those. But for sure, it's a bit of a paradoxical thing, Dena, because we need to be inspired by something that's on the other side of our comfort zone. And when we're inspired by something, a potential, could be a person, it could be, my early heroes were all athletes, sportsmen, athletes. And I was inspired by that, so I would dream of becoming like them. But what we're seeing when we're inspired by something on the other side of our comfort zone is we are actually seeing our own potential incarnate in another person that's coming to us from the future, meeting us in the present moment and saying, come. So the paradox there is, yes, we do want to say yes to that. If we're going to have true fulfillment and grow into, I don't really want to say the word destiny, but to grow into our potential, we need to say yes to that. But at the same time, making that an object of achievement is counterproductive at the very least. So it actually pushes it away from us. So there is a paradox there. But the way I work with people is that we will never grow into our potential unless we make it a goal. And yet, the moment we make it a goal, if we don't let go of it as a goal, it won't happen. So we have to activate the path of practice, and then we have to trust that the path of practice is going to take us forward. So it's a great point that you brought up, and it's a very tricky line.
It is, and that's where at least my meditation practice has come into play, is exactly that, because I see how my mind, it goes, and it gets lost in thought. And then I'm like, oh shit, I gotta like let go. And then I let go, and then I have to come back, and then I have to do it all over again and all over again. And it's always like this balance of like brakes and, pressing the gas, and then brakes and gas and brake. It's like kind of always this whole choreographed, I think, movement. And yeah, it's one of the things that meditation has opened up for me. And I wonder, what meditation, or I know there's like a zillion things I could say that meditation has done, but what are some of the things that you can think of that meditation has given you, or not? Like, maybe you thought something would happen, or you would get some realizations, and then none of those things happened.
Well, let's go back to what you were saying before. The sense of self, often in spiritual circles, it'll just be called the ego. But I don't want to give a misunderstanding that the ego is problematic, because it's not. No, the ego can be problematic, but the ego is not a problem. That's just who we are. But at the deepest level, the sense of self that is rooted in our consciousness, that creates this, when there's self, there's an other. And it creates this really basic, fundamental sense of separation in the world. That sense of self is kind of driving things, driving us towards both good and, I should say, healthy and unhealthy. It's driving us in healthy and unhealthy ways. But most of the majority of those drives, I would say most of those drives, like an iceberg, that the majority of the iceberg is, we can't see it. Most of those drives are far, far below our threshold of perception. Now, doing good therapy will actually help us to understand that a lot, and that's highly recommended. It's been tremendously beneficial in my life, I guess for you too.
Yes.
And meditation actually takes us all the way to the very, 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 very essential core of that root sense of self. And to be more specific, actually, not just meditation, but awareness-based or mindfulness-based meditation, not concentration-based meditation. That doesn't, not to say that there's anything wrong with concentration-based meditation. We need concentration. But mindfulness actually links us back, religio, it links us back to the fundamental, what in Buddhism is called wrong view, but the fundamental confusion that there is a self that's driving the car, that's running the show. And that self is the same self that tries to achieve enlightenment or something else. That sense of self is the same self that wants to argue with a taxi driver. That sense is the same self that wants to, find a romantic partner or make $1 million or, somehow get through this COVID situation because we don't like to feel insecure about this craziness. And, if we just go back to the very, very first teaching of the Buddha, dukkha secca, that it doesn't mean that life is suffering. It basically means that it's the truth of suffering, that it exists. It exists because of that very core root sense of self. And meditation, in a way, has actually helped me to uncover that, unwind that, and again, in a state experience. Not that I'm a master. I can't always do this in the bank. I can't always do this with my wife. I can't always do this with my children. I can't always do this when I'm, with my business, my 2 businesses and my students, etc. But in a very, very basic way, in the deepest states of meditation, it helps me to see that. And simply by seeing that, by being mindful and having a pure witness of this experience unfolding, it dissolves. And when it dissolves, there really are no problems. Now, as I come out of that state, of course, I have to do the laundry. I have bills to pay. There are problems. But every time I come out of that state, having that deeper sense of experience of non-self or selflessness, or you could even say of a non-duality, as I enter into the world of duality, there's just a little bit more space, a little bit more freedom. It's a little bit easier to cope with and adjust and have an emotional agility in life. And if I go directly to your question, what have I discovered in meditation? Well, there's a lot of things I discovered, but I guess I can say that's common is to say that which I have discovered is nothing like I imagined it was going to be, if that makes any sense. We hear about these deeper states of meditation and these experiences and these realizations and these peak experiences that we can have in Aikido, and you can actually read about them in great detail through people's personal experiences or through the ancient texts. There's lots of maps, and we know where we're going. And yet, when we get to the experience, it's always the same. It's like, oh wow, that's what this is. I never could have imagined it. Why could I not imagine it? Because it's beyond what the conceptual mind can conceive of. And that in and of itself is quite liberating. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I just wanted, your answer. So
yeah, that's my answer today.
yes, totally. And we actually, have to actually practice meditation to actually, realize and experience it. And that's such an interesting observation on my part and in my practice, where it's like, oh, I don't want to practice today. And I'm like creating all these things and doing this podcast and talking to other people that are meditating and, writing about meditation and reading and studying. And then at the end, I'm telling my boyfriend, I'm like, I'm doing all these things, but I actually have to practice, every day. So that is an interesting point that I'm observing as well with my practice, where it's like, I just have to sit down and fucking practice. Like, that's what I have to do. And how was the experience of the retreats for you? And what are you, what did your teachers, I'm sure your teachers taught you a zillion things, but how was that experience and what are you grateful for?
Well, it just connect to what you were saying, we do have to find some discipline and practice, and yet at the same time, if that's not balanced with surrender, the kind of the yin and the yang, the masculine and feminine of the whole spiritual path, if our discipline, it doesn't have a drop of surrender in it, it's going to be a pretty unhealthy, control and just dogmatic, etc.
Like suffocating, yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. And we're going to ruin our knees and our back and ruin relationships, everything. And at the same time, our surrender, because really we put ourselves in the practice and we have to let go to the process. And our surrender has to have a drop of discipline to it. Because if we're just all about surrender, we're just going to go hang out at the cafes and go swimming to the beach and, and do all the things that, that doesn't require any effort, but just more pleasure. So there does have to be a balance between these two. And I think with my retreats, because I never, it was hard for me to find a balance with those. I was always very, very good at discipline under the right conditions. But once I was out of those conditions, so when I left the dojo or I wasn't with my coach or my team sports or whatever, I was incredibly lazy. I would just let go completely. So I was polarizing discipline and surrender. I wasn't integrating them. And in a way, putting myself in retreat conditions did that work for me. It was just, I get on the retreat and okay, all I have to do is follow the schedule here. Get up at 4 a.m., meditate, have breakfast at 6 a.m., meditate more, have lunch at 12 a.m., no more, or 12 noon, no more food for the rest of the day.
No, yep.
In that tradition. And then just follow the schedule. You get a little break in the evening, then there's a talk, you get an interview, you get, at 9 o'clock it's over, you go back and maybe meditate a little bit more in your room, whatever, but then, go to bed, get up and do the same thing again. So that was a great, for me, that was great. I like I said, I always did well when I was under very clear structures. So it took care of that balance and free and surrender for me. However, internally, I still had to learn that. It took a lot of time. And it was really, again, if I just come back to what I was saying before, it was only through the repeated investigation of reality, and more specifically, the sense of self, although maybe that's not really the direction I want to go with this, but the direct experience of reality, that the sense of self started to dissolve, that confusion in me, that polarization in me, that fixation for whatever my past history and psychology is, that fixation would begin to dissolve, and I would begin to understand what it meant actually, in an impersonal or transpersonal way. And as gradually that reference became more and more stable in the stream of consciousness, in my own consciousness, then in moments of truth, it's much easier for me to let go of my egoic grasping and clinging, and choose to let go into the reality. And sometimes reality would require me to be one-pointed, disciplined with what's happening in the moment. And other times, reality requires me to profoundly let go. And like I said, it's always both. But there's a spectrum there, and reality will evoke what's needed. I mean, like with my little girls, in the morning when they're going to school, sometimes we're in great flow and we just flow and we get to school on time. Other times they want to watch their cartoons on TV, or they don't want to brush their teeth, or they don't want to put their shows, or, I have two girls, so they want to change their clothes again, and then they want to change their clothes again. And I'm like, so, it's like, no, discipline, structure. Let's get you girls out of school, out the door, so we can get to school on time. And it's a constant, I guess finally what I'll say is I don't have an answer to which it should be. But I think the more that we mature through the practice, that life's experience will evoke what is needed from us, and that evocation will cause it to naturally arise as an expression in how we meet reality.
Sometimes I'm so heartbroken with reality, realizing that I hadn't seen reality, like all these years really breaks my heart. But that's part of me trying to forgive myself and accept myself, and that realization of self and letting go. I don't know why I'm bringing this up now, but it just is coming up. The heartbreak, I deeply connect with that. I think that heartbreak is in any form we may experience heartbreak, loss and grief. Like a broken heart is a broken heart. And I think that is a powerful experience, that connecting to reality through heartbreak. That's how I experienced it. I connected once my heart was broken 4 years ago, suddenly. And that was my pathway to reality. And I don't know, I just wanted to bring that up for some reason. Do you have any thoughts on heartbreak?
There's a saying in meditation that whatever arises, let's just say in a person's human, spiritual, even psychological or emotional development, that whatever arises in the course of our practice is to be considered as path. And that's path. That's the path forward, that comes up, and it will. There's an old Jewish joke about the Jewish optimist and the Jewish pessimist. And the Jewish pessimist says, "Oh my God!" Actually, the Jewish pessimist said, "Oi, it could not get any worse." And the Jewish optimist says, "Oh yes, it can." And that's what the heartbreak is like, because basically we don't want to feel that. And yet the moment we start to feel it, and let that whole kind of rush of emotions. There's a few realizations. One realization is that it was always there. That our heartbreak is from the past. I guess it could happen today. Somebody could really break my heart today, but it's usually often it's from the past, and then we realize, oh my God, I've been carrying this for all these years, and I never really accepted it. I never really opened up to it, and that is like a double heartbreak. It's like a double cut. We had the original cut, and then we get the double cut when we realize, oh my God, I've been denying it, and it's been driving me in whatever, causing karma. So there's that. Yeah, there's that, and but we have to realize that that's the path, and yet we don't want to get fixated there. That the path will continue to lead us forward through that, very much like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grieving, is that we deny first, and then we get angry at the cause of our heartbreaks, and then we negotiate with it. Oh no, I'm not gonna, whatever, all kinds of negotiations, and then like the moment that you were talking about is that moment of acceptance, and that's the most depressing part of the whole process.
Yes.
And yet, if we surrender into that path of acceptance, and just wherever it's going to take us, forever, how long it's going to take us, and hopefully have some healthy support, external support, and so that we don't get fixated there. If we surrender and stay with it authentically, truly, we will move through it towards a greater, acceptance, which is at the end of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's model. And if I just kind of relate this back to Buddhist meditation, as I said before, dukkha secca, the truth, the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause, the truth of the cessation, and the truth of the path. There's a complementary teaching of the Four Noble Practices, or the four relationships in accordance with these four truths. So the truth of suffering, our noble, the higher truth, the noble truth of suffering, has a higher practice that goes along with it, and that's the practice of acceptance. So what I heard you say at the beginning, that when you finally, 4 years ago, your heart broke because you actually started to see, perhaps you allowed yourself to see, or you were able to see, whatever the conditions were, that was the beginning of the practice of acceptance. And it's important to understand that it is a noble practice, Dena. Oh my God, it's so hard for us to do that. But this is a high level practice to actually stop and accept the true nature of reality. And part of that is that suffering is constant. And it's not constant, I shouldn't say that. Suffering is a constant to life, that we're always moving towards suffering. Even if we're moving out of it, it's going to be coming up again at some point in the future. And acceptance is the first practice towards that. And the second noble truth is the truth of the cause, which is our grasping and clinging, or holding on to identifications, basically. The practice relationship or the practice in relationship to the truth of the cause is the practice of understanding. That we must understand, and think of moments where forget spiritual realization, but just where we start to understand the root drives of that we've been kind of going through our whole life, and maybe we understand what caused them. Mommy, daddy told me to do that, or my culture told me to do that, or I had a bad experience as a child, and whatever. Once we understand, and truly get to the root cause of understanding it, it leads automatically to that third noble truth, of the truth of cessation, that it stops, that we stop grasping and we stop clinging, and the drives lose their karmic fuel, and we come to the third practice, which is the practice of realization. We realize the truth of the cause, which is that I've been making this, it's all been in me the whole time, and now that I see that, now that I understand that, the realization is, oh my God, and it suddenly collapses. The whole house of cards collapses, and there's a tremendous amount of freedom to that. And then just the last thing I'll say, because it's, I don't want to go on too much, but the fourth noble truth is the truth of the path, that there's a path of practice, and the practice relationship and the practice in relationship to that truth is the noble practice of development. And that's, in a way, Dena, I mean, I don't know you that well, but I hear you that you're on a path of development in your life. Probably this podcast is even an expression of that personal development. And I feel that our conversation, you and I are just having a conversation, and it's a developmental conversation. And so in a way, we're practicing those 4 noble practices right now as we speak.
We are. That's beautiful.
I would even say that hopefully your listeners are kind of right there with us with these 4 noble practices as we speak.
What about anger?
What
And
what about it? Have you been talking to my wife?
No, I don't know your wife. No.
It's one of my afflictions sometimes.
Yes, yeah. No, I'm working with that. I've been suppressing anger all my life. I've been the good girl, the girl that always does what other people, say and want. Yes. And all of a sudden, having been connected to reality, part of reality now has been anger. And I'm working with it because I don't know where to put it. I don't know what to do with it. Because I didn't know, I would always just shove it down. So I wonder what your thoughts are on the emotion of anger.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll speak a couple of things I should say. First, I should give a caveat that I'm speaking under just kind of normal psychologically, a basic level of psychological stability, I guess I would say. Somebody may be dealing with some really, really serious traumatic issues from their past. And I have no expertise in speaking about that. So I just want to make that as a caveat that, that's something that people...
Me neither.
Okay. So under just a normal neurotic self,
right.
Anger, the second thing I'll say about it is I'm just going to speak from my own experience. Greed, hatred, and delusion. Actually, this is kind of a Buddhist frame, but these are the so-called 3 poisons in Buddhism that are just kind of in everybody's egoic or a stream of consciousness from a separate sense of self. And of the 3 of them, the strongest one for me is greed. And what I mean by greed is that I seek for some type of instant gratification, instant pleasure, something sweet to eat or something nice to listen to or watch on TV or whatever. That would be my escape from when I'm not experiencing, when I'm having a bad experience, when I'm experiencing something unsatisfactory. And then if I'm held in that and I'm not able to kind of get that instant gratification, then anger comes out of me. That's kind of my pattern. The delusion, I suppose I have it, but that was never really my big thing. So I do have experience of my own personal anger, but what I can say about that, it's much less, of course. All these years of practice has really meant confronting that and facing that and trying to understand that and working with that and making amends. And in Judaism, they talk about tikkun. Tikkun is healing any damage that has been done in any type of relationship. That's all something that needs to be atoned for. But my own personal experience with anger is that if I really allow myself to stop and be with the anger, not to suppress it, not to neither to activate it or to act or speak from it, nor to suppress it like a good meditator does. By the way, I did that for years. I used my meditation to totally suppress my anger in a very skillful way, but it was just a bypass. So post-meditation years, I did a lot of therapy. And when I say post-meditation, I mean those intensive retreat years that I was doing. Then I moved into doing a lot of therapy and learning how to kind of find that bandwidth where you can actually work with anger. And what I've found, again, this is just my personal experience here because I'm not an expert anger coach or anything like that. What I found is that if I really allow myself to just kind of be with the anger, fully experience it, but not act or speak from it, that I start to kind of understand that there's a deeper thing happening there. And it's usually fear or sadness of one kind. And if I allow myself to feel the fear or sadness, that usually means that I have to allow a certain level of emotional, I wouldn't say maybe sometimes breakdown, But I guess what I mean to say is that I have to allow the floodgates of emotions to come through. And the floodgates of emotion are usually just a sense of loss of control or helplessness or not wanting to let something go that's actually clearly going. And that's, in my own personal case, that's what's really underneath it. I think that for all of us, anger is as deep as it can be. It's superficial, and that there's something deeper. There's a deeper drive there. And if we can understand that deeper drive, then the anger itself also collapses. So I guess in relation, if we kind of put this in a meditation context, you know, there's different schools of meditation, as you know, but I'm just going to speak from a mindfulness-based meditation, vipassana, where we actually create the observer and we try to observe phenomena arising. That requires me to detach from whatever's arising, which would mean that I detach from the anger and see it until it dissolves and disappears, which is important, a very, very important skill to develop. In fact, your meditation will never go very, very far unless you develop that skill. However, therein lies the bypass. It's a paradox, because for me to really understand my psychological drives, my dissociated, disowned psychological drives that are causing the anger, for me to understand those, I can't detach from the anger, but rather I have to connect with the anger, and I don't make subject into object. Do you know what I mean by making subject into object? Yeah. So I'm angry, so I turn that into an object, and I see it, third person. I'm able to meditate with it till it disappears. Great meditative skill. Everybody needs to develop that in meditation. But if I'm going to integrate the dissociated aspect of that anger, I need to make object into subject. What that means is that often my anger will be projected onto the world. Like, that person made me angry. Those people made me angry. I push it out there. So it's already become an object, even though it's my projected anger. So the work to do is to make that object into subject. And what that means is I have to start, a good therapist will say, well, why are you angry? I'm angry at that person. Why are you angry at that person? Because they are ABC. Oh, really? ABC makes you angry? That's interesting. Tell me more about that. The therapeutic method will actually force me to connect with the anger inside of me. So that projected third person anger starts to become first person. So that what I was projecting out as an object of anger, I start to, through a process, experience it subjectively. And that's the process of integration. So there's kind of these dual, even though we started this whole dialogue about meditation, if meditation is not done in a corresponding therapeutic process where we actually feel our feelings and we reintegrate these feelings, then, once I've worked with my anger, I felt my anger, I've expressed my anger in a therapeutic context, safe space context, then when next time anger rises up, I meditate with it, it's actually an integrated practice. It's not a dissociative practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you're saying.
Yeah, so that's my relationship with anger. And I think people following a meditation practice, sometimes they forget that, no, there has to be an integration, that you also don't just turn it into objects. Sometimes you have to subjectively feel it. People doing a lot of therapy also sometimes forget that they do have the power to get out of it, to observe it. And the fact is, we need to do both. If we want to have an integral spiritual practice, an integrated practice, a spiritual practice that integrates the different aspects of being, we have to do both.
So what is your meditation practice these days?
Oh, my meditation practice these days is I meditate daily. I don't have a formal schedule. With kids, it's pretty hard to do that. Kids and two businesses and and family and stuff like that. It's not easy to set up a schedule. I would say, like what we're doing here, Dena, it's kind of a relational. I consider this a meditative practice because, like in meditation, our mindfulness will always take us to the leading edge of our experience. And from that leading edge, it will begin to unfold into a deeper and deeper experience. That's the nature of mindfulness. Mindfulness' basic quality is that it sinks. So I'm doing that throughout the day. whether I'm sitting, I usually have morning, I don't always drop off my girls at school, but when I do, I usually have 20 minutes in the morning where I can go by myself and get a coffee somewhere, and maybe 40 minutes if I don't have to drop off the kids. So that's my morning mindfulness practice. I usually sit and just kind of be. And maybe some creative, my work requires a lot of creativity. So maybe some creative juices will flow from that experience, but that's my daily thing. When I meet with students, every meeting there's a formal meditation, whether it's an Aikido or online meditation group or one of the groups that I'm running. So I'm working in a meditative context. And the fact that my life is pretty complex right now doesn't allow me to have necessarily, I sit 30 minutes here and 30 minutes there, but I do a lot of mindful sandwich practice. What that means is that, I know I'm going into a situation, I'll stop and center and become mindful. I'll go into a certain situation, a meeting or something, and then when I finish that situation, when I move out, I stop and become mindful again. And
so that's the mindful sandwich.
That's the mindful sandwich. Yeah, you have the.
I've never heard that. That's so funny.
Well, yeah,
I love that.
You consciously do a short mindfulness exercise before or after an activity. So I do that really regularly. But what I can also say is that I'm able to do this because I have had so much formal practice. 20 years I was really disciplined, and I still go into my deepest states. Again, with I have 22,000 hours plus on the cushion, with all the years, with the 3 years on retreat and stuff like that. So that type of practice opens up access to states pretty readily. And in fact, I've been involved with a lot of fMRI experiments and stuff like that. So I can access these states pretty regularly. And I do on a daily basis, the deeper states of my practice, I would say. I wouldn't say the deeper states of everything because there's always more. But the deeper states of my practice, I'm able to access on a regular basis pretty much daily. But I can have this kind of practice simply because of my past. And I'm also in deep acceptance and surrender to the fact that I have a family. And it just doesn't allow me to do what I was able to do before, especially kids. Kids are a game changer for in all the good ways.
So what would you tell someone that has never meditated before or someone that's just starting and they're fresh in a practice? What would you tell them?
Oh, it's such a general question. It depends on what their intention is in the practice. I guess the way I can answer that is that it's important to meet people where they're at, Dena, and validate where they're at. So, for example, if somebody's coming to meditation because they want to have a better sex life, okay, fine, sure. Let's start there. Or if they want to make $1 million, let's say it's something very kind of personal or maybe even selfish intentions. That's okay, fine. So we meet there and we talk, and then we just introduce the mindfulness practice, and that will lead them beyond. So I guess my basic orientation when working with people is to meet them where they're at, but not to leave them where they're at. And that depends on the process, not on me. But I guess the main thing is that mindfulness-based meditation always requires us to, not to be active and not to be passive, right there in a perfect balance between activity and passivity, but to stay present with what's arising, to know its qualities and characteristics, and then to know what happens to it. Those 3 moves. Know what it is. For example, it's the breath. What are the qualities and characteristics? It's a tight breath. It's a relaxed breath. It's a slow breath. It's a fast breath, a long breath, short breath, whatever. Know the qualities in it, because it's not what it was yesterday. And it's not even what it was 5 minutes ago. Know the qualities and characteristics. And as you continue to know the qualities and characteristics, what happens to it? That's meditation for the beginner, for the intermediate person, for the advanced meditator. That's the mindfulness-based meditation in the boardroom. That's mindfulness meditation in the bedroom. That's mindfulness meditation in the meditation hall or in the marketplace. It doesn't really matter. That is the fundamental practice. Know what it is. Know its qualities and characteristics, which requires a deeper dropping into mindfulness. And know what happens to it as you continue to observe it. And in terms of my own work, if anybody's interested in looking into what I do, I have an online training academy called the Integral Dojo. And the website is www.theintegraldojo.com, one word. And I offer a lot of trainings there, so you can always have blog posts and you can get a lot of information from that. And other than that, I would say that, hang on just a second. What do I feel is really important now? Is that globally we're going through a crisis. Like, once in a generation or once in 100-year kind of crisis that's affecting all of us in so many levels, and God bless us all, and in order for us to move through this crisis, it's going to require. Well, I think we are moving through this crisis, but in order for us to move through this crisis in a generative way, it's going to require a deeper connection with ourselves, individually, personally, and a deeper connection with each other in whatever way that may manifest. And I would say certainly a deeper acceptance and forgiveness of each other.
This podcast is created for people like you who want to finally find out what this meditation hype is all about. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to sign up for my free weekly newsletter. You'll find that link in the episode notes. The One Fierce Heart podcast is produced and hosted by me, Dena Argyropoulou. Sound editing and mixing by Matrix Recording Studio in Athens, Greece.